Hello, boys and girls. In the spirit of Halloween, I have a little story I'd like to read for you. It's actually kind of originated at Harlow Elementary, so I'll fill you in on the rest of it later. The title of the story is Taily Po. The trials and tribulations of living in today's modern society can tend to wear on your nerves. One can grow weary of dealing with bills, taxes, insurance, traffic, and pollution. Not to mention anything about keeping food in the refrigerator. Oftentimes the whole thing can make you want to holler and just throw up your hands. And that's exactly what old Bill Smith did. He gave up all the luxuries, and if you ask me, some of the necessities of modern life. He loaded up just the barest of essentials and his 3 hunting dogs into his truck and moved way up into the North Georgia mountains. Smitty, that's what the folks around Hartwell called him, figured it wouldn't be that much of an adjustment. After all, he did love hunting, fishing, and the great outdoors. And he did have the companionship of his 3 best friends, his hunting dogs, I Know, You Know, and Comtico Calico. What more could a man ask for? Smitty built himself a nice little cabin way back in the woods. It wasn't very big, but it was just enough for him. The cabin only had 2 rooms. One he used for a bedroom, and the other for every other room. You know, the living room, the dining room, the den, the kitchen. He had built himself a nice big fireplace where he could cook his food and warm his body on chilly nights. He planted himself a nice little vegetable garden on the side of his house and would hunt and fish for most of his food. But at least once a month, he would drive the 25 miles down the mountain to the little store to buy those things that he couldn't provide for himself. During the warm months, Smitty had no problem catching as much small game as needed, but the colder months proved to be a little more difficult to keep his stomach full. Well, it was on one of those cold wintry nights that Smitty went out to his storage shed to see what he could find for dinner. All he could find was a small piece of fatback meat and a handful of rice. There was too much snow on the ground to travel the 25 miles to town, so he had to make do with what he had. He ate the fatback and a little of the rice, but he gave most of the rice and the water where he had boiled the meat to his dogs. After all, they had to eat too. He called out, I know, you know, come to go Calico, come on doggies and get you some of this here dinner. And those dogs came running in as fast as they could and lapped up all of that rice mixture. Smitty was still a little hungry though, but there wasn't much he could do about that. So despite the protest of his grumbling stomach, Smitty stoked the fire in the fireplace to keep the cabin warm, and he went to bed. The sound of the wind blowing around and in some places through the tiny cabin had almost lulled Smitty to sleep when he heard something. He opened his eyes and saw a shadow on the wall. He eased out of bed and tiptoed into the other room. There, he saw the oddest looking creature he had ever seen. It was short and stubby, with pointed ears and short fat feet with long claws, and it had a long bushy tail. There were no open doors or windows, so Smitty was confused at how the funny looking critter had gotten in. Smitty quietly picked up his axe, crept over to the odd critter, who was devouring an insect of some sort, slowly raised his axe, and came down squarely on the creature's tail. Smitty turned to catch the varmint, but it was too quick. It hurriedly escaped through the wall. So Smitty was left standing there with his long bushy tail and a blood-laden axe in his hand, and no sign of the funny-looking creature. Smitty was about to throw the old tail out the door when his growling stomach reminded him of how hungry he was. So he took that tail, cleaned it, cooked it with some of the herbs from his garden he had stored away, and he ate it. Didn't taste that bad. Why, it kind of tasted like chicken. With his stomach finally full, Smitty got back into his warm, cozy bed. Smitty had just drifted off to sleep when a strange sound awakened him. It sounded like something trying to scratch its way into the cabin. Perhaps a raccoon. Smitty knew that if he stayed real quiet, it would probably just go away. So he stayed as quiet as he could. But then he heard a strange, otherworldly noise. A voice which hissed, "Taily Po, I want my Taily Po." Smitty thought the wind was playing tricks on his ears. But then he heard it again. "Taily Po, I want my Taily Po." Smitty jumped out of bed, flung open the door, and called out to his dogs. "I know, you know, come to go Calico. Come on over here and see what's making that noise." The dogs came running, barking and sniffing around, but they didn't find anything at all. So Smitty put the dogs back outside and went to bed. Sleep had just eased itself into Smitty's body when he heard the voice again. This time, the scratching sounded like it was at the window. Whatever it was, it really wanted to get in. But the scratching seemed to be on two walls at one time. Smitty called out, hey, who's that at my door? Get on away from here." Then he heard the strange voice again, only this time louder. "Taily Po, Taily Po, I want my Taily Po. Taily Po, Taily Po, I'm coming to get my Taily Po." Old Smitty, who wasn't one to frighten easily, was getting a little shaky. This was getting really weird. So he eased to the window and he called, "I know, you know, come to go Calico. Come on over here and see what that is scratching at my house." The three dogs bounded up to the porch and they sniffed around and barked and sniffed, but they never found anything at all. Smitty decided to stay up for the rest of the night to protect himself, his dogs, and the little cabin. So he pulled a chair next to the fireplace, grabbed a blanket from his bed, and settled in for the rest of the wind-chilled wintry night. Soon, Smitty drifted off to sleep, and once again, settled in for the night. It was almost dawn when Smitty suddenly woke up. The sound of scratching seemed to reverberate from every area of the cabin. Smitty searched frantically for his axe, his rifle, or something to defend himself with. But he was so frightened, he couldn't find anything at all. The scratching grew louder and louder and louder, and then the voice. "Taily Po, where is my Taily Po? Give me back my Taily Po." Smitty yelled back, "Leave me alone, I ain't got your Taily Po." Then he called, "I know, you know, come to go Calico. Come on in here and protect your old master." This time, the dogs didn't come. So he called again. "I know, you know, come to go Calico. Don't you hear me calling you? Come on here, doggies." He waited, but still not one dog came running. Smitty had never been so scared in his life. He ran to his bed and jumped in. The scratching and the voice grew louder and louder and louder. Smitty yelled back as loud as he could, "I ain't got no Taily Po, so why don't you just leave me alone and go on about your business? I ain't never hurt nobody or nothing. Just leave me alone." The scratching seemed to be inside the house now, and the voice was so loud it was deafening. "Taily Po, you took my Taily Po, and now I'm back to get it. Give it to me now." Smitty pulled the cover up over his head and stayed as quiet as he could. But the scratching was now in his room. "Taily Po, you better give me my Taily Po." Smitty then felt the thing scratching up the bottom of his bed and onto the covers. Smitty eased the cover down to see what was steadily approaching. Then he saw it. A short, stubby creature with pointed ears, fat feet with long claws, and bloodshot red eyes that glowed in the dark. Eyes that seemed to burn right through Smitty. Before he could pull the cover over his head again, that thing pounced on his chest, looked straight down at him and said, "You got my Taily Po, and you better give it back to me now." Smitty yelled, "I ate it! I ate your Taily Po, it's gone!" And that thing started to scratch and claw and tear away at poor old Smitty, trying to get that Taily Po back. Smitty tried to fight back, but that thing was too strong, and those claws were too sharp. Smitty's screams echoed throughout the mountains, then stopped, leaving a chilling silence. After a month or two, without hearing from Smitty, the folks who owned the store at the base of the mountain went up to his cabin to make sure everything was all right. When they got there, they found his cabin torn to shreds, but no sign of Smitty or the dogs. They searched the woods and called for them. Smitty! I know, you know, come to go Calico. But they never found a thing. As the search party was heading down the mountain, the wintry wind began to blow, and a strange voice could be heard saying, Taily Po, now I've got my Taily Po. The end. All right, that's the end of our story. But for those of you who attended Hartwell Elementary, you know the fable or the legend of the creature in the basement of the upper building. Well, I spoke with Coach Mubrin, and one of those steel doors was left cracked open somehow. And I think Miss Fouch's class actually heard some growling outside her window one day when she had the window open. So just in the spirit of Halloween, I'm not saying there's anything to be afraid of, but just know that he always wants his Taily Po.